Waiting for Rockfin. All right. And Rumble. Great.
I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Thursday. Welcome to Sab's podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sab's podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays and Fridays, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. And what's up, guys? Welcome back. Dr. Darity and Kirsten, I can see you in the background, but your camera's off. So just let me know when you're ready. So welcome back, guys. I hope you're excited. Hope you are excited for tonight's show. Yeah, I think your camera's still off. I'm not sure if you're using a webcam or the computer laptop. Eric, can you chat with them in the private chat for StreamYard? Thanks. All right, guys, welcome. All right, let's go ahead, and I want to get started off shouting out some of the comments while I'm waiting for them to get ready. I think they just have to turn their camera on. I'm not sure. It's just a white screen. I'm not sure why. Shout out to Bryce. Bryce says, looking forward to more reparations discussions. This should be a good one today. Thank you so much for that. Hannah says, working and listening. Shout out, Hannah. Welcome. Greetings, Purple Philosophy says, I'm putting together 4 TV trays. That is interesting. Welcome so much for that. Shout out to Lorez says, sup, Sabrina, Eric, and Sabby fam. There was a RFK town hall. Thanks for the tip. Smash the like, thumbs up. Yes, there actually was an RFK town hall last night. And I don't know if a lot of people were aware of that. News Nation hosted. We'll get into that later on tonight. But yeah, he actually did have a town hall. Okay, thank you. Okay. Shout out to Ray says, hello. Greetings, Rodrigo says, RFK Jr. speaks out stronger about the deep state than I've seen from Cornel West. Interesting. Shout out to Gamer says, hello to Lawrence. Thank you for the super chat, Oz. Stacy Plaskett interview tonight, Sabby. No. I do not think Delegate Stacy Plaskett will come onto this show. I don't think that would happen, but I do have update about her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. So stay tuned for that. Shout out to Lawrence, who's a Sabby member, says, all right. Greetings, Ilhanner says hello to Gamer. Shout out to JB says hello, everyone. I can see you now. Let me go ahead and bring you in.
Okay. Hi.
Hello.
Oh, good evening.
Good evening. So nice to meet you.
It's good to meet you.
Good to meet you as well.
All right, everyone. My special guests tonight are Dr. Sandy Darity and Kirsten Mueller. Dr. Darity is an economist and social sciences researcher. He's has varied research interests that have included the transatlantic slave trade and African American reparations. Kirsten Mueller is a writer, a folklorist, a museum consultant, and lecturer whose work focuses on race, art, history, and politics. And Dr. Darity and Kirsten Mueller are co-authors of From Here to Equality. Welcome so much, and thank you both for coming on.
Thanks, but it's Kirsten Mullen.
Mullen? I don't know why they have Mueller here. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
My bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to get started talking about reparations. So we have talked about this before a couple of times on this show. And one of the things that I have noticed is that there does seem to be some misconceptions about what reparations actually is from some people. Some people think that this is a handout. I've explained to people it's not a handout, that it's a debt that's owed. But I want to hear from both of you because you've done the research. How would you define what reparations actually is for American descendants of African American descendants of slavery?
So
you want to start?
You're absolutely right that it is a debt that's owed by the federal government, and we pinpoint that debt to the racial wealth gap, which the federal government is responsible for and basically initiated at the end of the Civil War when it promised the newly emancipated 40-acre land grants and then reneged on that promise. At the same time, the federal government did give 160-acre land grants to white Americans, including new immigrants from Europe. This was through a policy called the 1862 Homestead Act. And so this is a situation where Black Americans could have had a tremendous leg up by the acquisition of an asset in the form of land. This is land that had previously been owned and occupied by the Confederates, but land that was not given to them, in fact. And so white Americans were given this opportunity to have wealth accumulation, and Black Americans were not. So you have the federal government, working actively to assist white people with the accumulation of wealth, but deaccumulating wealth opportunities for Black Americans starting in 1865. So that's where we start with this racial wealth gap. And then there have been a number of instances where federal policies have continued to expand on this racial wealth gap. So in the 19th century, the way that the federal government helped white people become middle class, basically, was through the acquisition of land. But when you move up to the 20th century, the project was to help white Americans obtain homes and businesses. And this was done through the FHA, the GI Bill. So you had this moment when, on paper, all veterans were thought to be eligible for this tremendous benefit, another leg up from the federal government. But in fact, the project was, the programs were very discriminatively applied and administered. And as a result, white Americans, were, very much, their wealth position was greatly improved. But Black Americans, again, were left in the cold. Then we, move up to the period of redlining. And so here you've got the Federal Housing Authority colluding with banks and mortgage institutions to keep Black people from getting loans at a decent rate, interest rate on residential properties. And then when they did manage to acquire properties, they were not appraised at the same rate as properties belonging to white people of comparable value. So then you have the federal highway system project coming through, and in many cases, these interstate highways came straight through Black communities, and in many instances decimated the Black business centers, so the Black business districts. So these are some of the ways that the federal government has disadvantaged Black people in terms of their wealth acquisition, but assisted white Americans. So, we say the federal government is the culpable party and should pay reparations to Black American descendants of U.S. slavery.
Yeah, I'd like to add a brief addendum about the Homestead Act of 1862. Trina Shanks Williams, who is a researcher at the University of Michigan, estimates that 1.5 million white families received 160-acre land grants under that particular piece of legislation, largely from the end of the Civil War into the early part of the 20th century. And if we estimate that the average family was about 4 people, which is an underestimate because families were considerably larger than that during the latter part of the 19th century and the early part of the 20th century. But if we use family of 4 as our number, that means that 6 million people received land grants, and that would have been approximately 10 to 12% of the white population in the United States. In contrast, the maximum estimates that we've seen of the number of Black Americans who received land patents under either the short-lived Southern Homestead Act or the few who got land patents under the Homestead Act amounts to about 10,000 people. And that's 10,000 out of the 4 million persons who were newly emancipated at the end of the Civil War. So if we use that language, handout, white Americans have received enormous handouts. And we don't necessarily object to handouts, as they may be a hand up, if you prefer, but we do object to the fact that they were unevenly allocated in such a way that they produce the current racial wealth gap.
Another way that the federal government disadvantaged Black Americans was by watching a series of massacres that took place across the country of Black communities. And so we're talking about, moments when Black people who were actively engaged in politics, who were exercising the right to vote, or who were simply, successful in life, who had managed to acquire material wealth, were the targets of jealous white people. And we see this pattern, we have documented over now 100 massacres that took place between Reconstruction and the end of World War II. Many of your audience members may be familiar with Tulsa, Oklahoma, the massacre that took place in 1921, largely because Donald Trump and Joe Biden both went to Tulsa during the 100-year anniversary. And we often say, somewhat cynically, in many ways, the reason why we know about these incredibly successful Black communities is that white people destroyed them. People will say, Wilmington, North Carolina, was the first, was the only coup, the only place in the country where duly elected, legally elected officials were removed from office. And this was in 1898. But we have documented at least 6 such moments when that happened. The earliest of which was in Coushatta, Louisiana, Colfax, Louisiana, 1873, Coushatta, 1874. And what we're seeing too is that there were basically playbooks that these white people used in these attacks. So we mentioned Wilmington, North Carolina, where massacre killed hundreds of Black people, and there was a mass exodus of the Black population. And for the next 60 or 70 years, the White Democratic Party, which in those days was more akin in ideology to the Republicans of today, they ruled for another 60 to 70 years. And the Black population just drops tremendously as a consequence of this massacre. But we learned that in Fort Bend County, Texas, which is near where my maternal grandfather was raised, in 1888, 89, so 10 years prior, the white people, the white Democrats drafted what they called a White Men's Declaration of Independence. and they spelled out, what they were going to do. And you see a similar document with the same title, White Men's Declaration of Independence, that was used by these white Democrats in Wilmington. So these are not sporadic moments. And the federal government could have intervened. The federal government could have insisted that these people be brought to trial, but that didn't happen. So for all of these reasons, we say the federal government is the culpable party. And we can talk maybe a little bit later about them being the capable party to pay reparations to Black American descendants of U.S. slavery.
You mentioned 40 acres in a mule. And for those who are not aware, that was one of the promises that was made by General Sherman, if I remember correctly, that freed slaves would get 40 acres in a mule. Obviously, that did not happen. What do you think the equivalent
it did begin, but only temporarily. So if you look at Sherman's Special Field Order number 15 and look at the territory that was designated as land for the freedmen, it would have been approximately 5.3 million acres of land stretching from the Sea Islands of South Carolina to northern Florida at the border of the St. Johns River. Now, what actually happened was about 40,000 of the 4 million folks who had been newly emancipated were settled on 400,000 acres, which is a fraction of the 5.3 million that was initially designated. And then President Andrew Johnson, who I think we both argue is the worst president in the history of the United States, which is quite an accomplishment. President Andrew Johnson reversed the plan for land reform for the freedmen. And so even that smaller share of 400,000 acres was restored to the former slaveholders. And I would just add that the 5.3 million acres in Sherman's Special Field Order was effectively a promissory note indicating that these 40-acre land grants would be made to all of the 4 million newly emancipated. But that's something that never happened.
What do you think the equivalent of 40 acres in a mule would be today, if we're talking like dollars and cents?
Well, I mean, it depends on what interest rate you use to try to come up with a present value estimate by compounding. But I mean, if you use 4%, then I guess you get into the vicinity of probably $200 billion. And if you use 6%, then you get closer to the $1 trillion range on the present value of the land.
Wow. Some people, one of the pushbacks that has come up in reference to reparations, I have friends of all different races, nationalities. Some of my friends that are second generation or third generation immigrants in this country, whether their parents are from Jamaica or Haiti, they're curious as to why it would not apply to them. And from what I've read about reparations is that it has to be based on lineage. And I think the 14th Amendment, if it was just based on like skin color, the 14th Amendment, from what I understand, can come in and actually overturn it. But I want to hear from both of you, like, do you feel people who are immigrants from countries like Jamaica, Haiti, where should their reparations come from? For example, do you feel that their reparations should come from the UK or should come from France? Could you please explain a little bit about that?
So absolutely. I mean, we absolutely believe that they have reparations claims that should be made, but not to the U.S. government. And as you said, if your forebears were colonized or enslaved by the UK, this will be the case for Trinidad, Tobago, Jamaica, Antigua. That claim should be taken to the UK. Haiti, as you mentioned, that claim should be taken to France. Now, that's a curious case, because France forced Haiti to pay reparations to France. Yep. So not only should they get that money back, but they and the interest from it, but they should also receive reparations from France. But we're focusing on the descendants of the people who were promised and denied these 40-acre land grants. This is when the racial wealth gap began. And it has continued. We're also talking about folks whose ancestors or themselves lived through Jim Crow. I mean, our lives began during Jim Crow. We're talking about people who came to this country in shackles, not the population that came here voluntarily, and in large measure because of what they saw that the slaves had built. This idea that you come to the United States voluntarily and black and white people, because of the incredible infrastructure that you see here, the opportunity that you see here. After you've been here for a while and the police begin to see you, we're talking about black people now, the police begin to see you as just another black person, that you then say, well, I deserve reparations, just strikes us as odd. There's an organization called CARICOM that works to seek reparations for the nation states in the Caribbean. And they don't include Black Americans of U.S. slavery in their claims, nor should they. But the reverse is also true. Black American descendants of U.S. slavery should not be compelled to include, Black people from across the diaspora in their reparations claims to the federal government.
What do you say to people who are, and I'm going to go back to Haiti because this tends to be the country where they are experiencing a lot of struggle and turmoil. If we go back to President Woodrow Wilson, for example, he actually intervened, sent the U.S. Marines into Haiti, took over their businesses and their banks. And people in Haiti have been struggling like ever since. What do you say about people who are coming to the U.S. from Haiti? For example, the Haitian migrants that tried to come through last year after Joe Biden was elected, they were automatically, boom, just pushed out. Some would argue that the reason why they're coming here is because of the destruction that has been done by the U.S. government to their country. So the fact that
there's no question that people are leaving because of the destruction that's been done to their country. But that leaves open the question as to where they choose to go. And it's not necessarily clear that the only option is the United States of America. And to the extent that that's not clear, it means that there's an element of choice in choosing to come here. And I think the issue for us is not a claim that people are not subjected to racism if they are Black and from other parts of the world. The issue for us is if you choose to migrate to a racist country, there is something really paradoxical about asking for reparations thereafter. If we decide that there is a legitimate claim of some sort for reparations, as opposed to some sort of redress through the legal system, then I think that would be a separate claim from the one that's being made by Black American descendants of U.S. slavery. And I don't think it should be piggybacked onto the claim that's being made by the folks who are descendants of the persons who were denied the 40 acres of land in the United States.
When you migrate to a country, you migrate to its history and to its obligations. What would this country be like if all of these immigrants said, we're here because of what, enslaved Black people created and what their ancestors built upon, and we're going to roll up our sleeves and fight for reparations for them. How about that?
I mean, just as Black Americans supported the anti-apartheid movement in Southern Africa and most anti-colonial projects throughout the world, we think there could be some reciprocation.
I mean, as an undergraduate, a lifetime ago, during the Pleistocene era, I was a member of the African Liberation Support Committee, and we rallied, we marched, we raised money. We wrote op-eds, trying to do our part to, put pressure on, these European countries to decolonialize these countries.
Push for colleges and universities to divest
University
in
of Texas
companies
Austin,
that had
investments
operations
in South Africa and all across the continent. What if the African nation, if the African Union or individual African countries would say, we'll no longer allow the United States to put another military base in our country until Black Americans since U.S. slavery get reparations.
Mm.
Or we'll no longer, we will not welcome more American corporations until this happens. That's the kind of unity that we're looking for.
Those are all good points. In reference to lineage, I think a lot of us that are African Americans in this country have a difficult time tracing back our lineage. Like, I know for me, I can only go back to like my great grandparents. Before that, I don't know. I don't know. I can't find anything before that. How can people, or what do you feel is one of the best ways that people can find out if they are a part of, African American descendants of slavery, for those of us that have struggled to find that information?
Well, let me just ask, when you say you can go back as far as your grandparents,
My great grandma.
your great grandparents, which census do your great grandparents appear in?
The U.S.
The earliest census.
The earliest census where you find your great grandparents listed.
I just know it was like the U.S. I mean, my great grandmother was still alive when I was a teenager. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But still,
when was she born? Do you know?
In Baltimore, Maryland.
No, I'm saying when was she born? What year?
That would have been 19. I honestly don't know off the top of my head. I'm embarrassed. I'm sorry. But a long time ago. When I was a teenager, she was already in her 80s, I want to say.
Okay. So I guess, well, you can elaborate on this more than I can, but we just think that the quality of African-American genealogical work is so good now that if you had a professional genealogist working with you, you'd be able to establish your historical family connection to slavery. And I know that you know quite a bit more about.
Yeah, I mean,
about this
more research tools are coming online every day. The entire Freedmen's Bureau records are now online, for example. You may be aware of Callie House, who was an early advocate for reparations for Black Americans of U.S. slavery. This is a woman who was born in 1898. Who was trying to make reparations happen in the
No, she was working on reparations in 1898.
That's right. You're right.
She was born into slavery.
I'm confusing her with Audley Moore,
yeah,
who was born in 1898.
Yeah.
And but one of her idea was this woman who was born enslaved, never had a formal education beyond the 6th grade, took in laundry for a living, supported her. She was a widow. Supported her 5 children through, her work as a laundry cleaner. And so her idea was, white veterans from the Civil War received pensions. Why shouldn't the Black veterans receive a pension? And then she broadened that scope to include, all Black people who had been enslaved. But her efforts were not successful. But there have been people who've been trying to make this happen for a very, very long time. But Callie House, the federal government, which was constantly watching her and eventually puts her in jail. She served 1 year of her sentence, but the federal government's estimates were that she had, her organization had over 300,000 paid members. And so the membership forms included information, about your name, where you lived, your age, where you had been enslaved, the name of your enslaver. And if you had been enslaved more than once, if you had, that sort of chain of information, all of those records are in the Library of Congress. So that's another resource. But, I think the last 15 years or so have seen a proliferation of both these finding aids, but also the interest of people to learn to do this work. And I think if you were to connect with a professional genealogist, you might learn a bit more about your family.
Yeah, and in the final chapter of our book, From Here to Equality, we actually sketch a plan for reparations, which includes a recommendation that the federal government establish an agency that would be staffed by trained genealogists to provide free services to any individual who is trying to establish a lineage claim. But I want to add something else. people are very resistant to the idea of using race as a condition for eligibility for reparations because they are convinced that the court system will strike it down, just as it struck down affirmative action today.
Right.
But I think we need to have both a lineage condition and some condition that is linked to personal identity. Otherwise, you have the possibility of people who are currently living as white establishing that they do have an enslaved ancestor somewhere in their family tree, and then making a claim for access to reparations. So the lineage claim is not sufficient in and of itself. The race claim isn't either, because if you just leave it open to race, then you have a situation where anybody who is Black who has come to the United States would be treated as being eligible for reparations. So you need both. And so we talk about having the following set of standards for eligibility.
Okay. I was going to say
first, yeah, okay.
I was going to say this, in fact, is the first pillar
of our reparations
program.
Yeah.
This eligible, this
we
lineage.
have 4 pillars, and this is the first one.
So first, the first thing is you need to know who reparations are for.
Yeah.
Right. And so for us, we're talking about Black American descendants of U.S. slavery. And as Sandy said, these are individuals who can meet both a lineage standard and an identity standard. So people who can trace their ancestry to at least one person who was enslaved in the United States, and who also self-identify as Black, African-American, Afro-American, or Negro for at least 12 years prior to the creation of a reparations study commission or reparations program, whichever comes first. So that's the first pillar. Okay. And then the second pillar is that any reparations program should have as one of its primary goals the elimination of this huge racial wealth gap. And, we know that that gap at minimum is about $14 trillion at the moment, right? And then the third pillar is that payments to the eligible recipients should be made directly to them, not to some third agency, that's going to manage the funds. It's not just to some scholarship fund, not solely to, funds to develop curricula or to, tear down the monuments to, white supremacists. But, in the case, so we've looked at a lot of reparations projects around the world, and the successful ones include a provision for payments to be made directly to the community of eligibility. And so, our attitude is, why should that be any different when the potential recipients of reparations are Black American descendants of U.S. slavery? And then the fourth pillar is who should pay? And for us, that's the federal government. So any true reparations program should have all 4 of these pillars, so that any reparations commission would have basically a blueprint for their work. I mean, you could have a reparations commission, duly paneled, work really hard, and at the end of their service, determine that what we need is a better apology, a stronger apology, or what we need is, we need to wrap city, states, governments on the wrist and say, you all need to do better, but no specifics. But we think that we need specific information so that true reparations can be delivered to the eligible community, which is, for us, Black American descendants of U.S. slavery.
What about people who are, let's say, biracial? Because this is another question that a lot of people have brought my way. What about
if they meet the criteria?
Yeah.
If they meet the criteria.
If they have at least one ancestor who was enslaved in the United States, and if they self-identified as Black for at least 12 years before the adoption of a reparations plan or a study commission for reparations, then they're fully eligible. We don't have any skin shade test. We don't have any fractions of Blackness test. We have those 2 conditions.
Okay, that makes sense. One of the things I did notice in your research, and I think this is something that really needs to be discussed. Over the past, I would say 2 years, I've seen a number of people appear on mainstream media and make the claim that canceling student loan debt closes the racial wealth gap. I saw in your research, you mentioned not only canceling student loan debt, but you also referred to baby bonds as well, as though these two things alone actually do not close the racial wealth gap. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because a lot of people believe that, by the way.
Yeah, well, neither will close the racial wealth gap, either alone or in conjunction. But what's really critical is how you measure the racial wealth gap. So a lot of people measure the racial wealth gap at what we refer to as the median, which is the middle value among Black households and the middle value among white households. They make the comparison and then they subtract the Black middle households wealth level from the white middle households wealth level. And that gives you a figure that's somewhere in the vicinity of maybe $138,000 to $140,000. We say that you really should use what we conventionally think of as the average or the mean for making your judgment about the magnitude of the racial wealth gap. And when you go that route, the figure is closer to $840,000. So when people are making the claim that policies like baby bonds or policies like student debt cancellation are going to close or eliminate the racial wealth gap, frequently they are thinking about the racial wealth gap at the median. But interestingly enough, while baby bonds can come close to eliminating the racial wealth gap when measured at the median, even at the median, student debt cancellation doesn't do a heck of a lot. Mm-hmm. What people don't realize is if you take all categories of indebtedness, even though the average level of Black student debt is higher than the average level of white student debt, if you look at all categories of indebtedness, actually white folks have a higher level of debt than Black folks. And the reason we get this wealth disparity is because white folks have a whole lot more assets than Black folks. So the wealth gap is an asset gap. It is not a gap that's attributable to differences in indebtedness. And so student loan debt's only a component of the total debt that's held by either Black or white households. And so there's not much of an effect on the wealth gap, either at the median or the mean, from closing the student loan differential. And we're in favor of student debt cancellation. Don't get us wrong. We just don't think it's going to do much about the wealth gap. And when you look at the mean, neither policy is going to have much of an effect.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying that. I've been saying that for so long, and people are like, no, it will close it. And I'm like, first of all, not all African Americans went to college and even have student loan debt.
No, that's right. That's right. Yeah. And that's another factor. The enrollment rates are different between Blacks and whites. So even though Blacks who have debt have a higher average level than whites who have student loan debt. Okay. The proportion of whites who have some sort of student loan debt versus the proportion of Blacks who have student loan debt, whites, there's a higher proportion of whites simply because more whites go to college and university proportionately. Yeah.
Right. Another thing I want to mention too, in reference to the universal program. So a lot of the people in this audience came from the Bernie Sanders movement. And we have our criticisms of Bernie Sanders now. But a lot of us were for pushing those universal programs, giving everybody health care, canceling student loan debt, et cetera.
We're all for that.
Yeah. Could you explain why even implementing those universal programs, it still doesn't put everyone in this country at an equal level?
Yeah.
Well, it can't. I mean, just the math. Okay. So if I have $100 and you have 200 and we each get 25, you now have 225 and I have 125. So we both moved up a little bit, but the gap is the same.
Right.
The gap is that's what a universal program means. Everybody gets the same thing.
Well, no, not always.
Well,
you can have a universal program that's not uniform.
Well,
it has to be pegged to something.
but universal, if it's universal,
Yeah.
then everyone gets the
It's
same
something.
thing.
Yeah.
You know, but if it's means tested, then that's a little different. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, rising tides, you know, raise all boats, but they don't change the relative height of the boats.
Yeah. Yeah. And,
Makes sense.
and even if you have a means tested program, it depends on what the magnitude is of the difference that between what you're giving persons in group A and group B. And there's no universal proposal I've seen, even with staggered payments, that would come close to eliminating the racial wealth differential.
And as you've said too, you know, Sabby, everyone is not eligible for these programs. You know, like we don't have any babies in our household anymore. Our college debt took us forever to pay it, but it is now paid. So, you know, relief of college debt would not help us. So, you know, there are all kinds of nuances to these programs that would that make it impossible for everyone to benefit from them.
What do you think in reference to strategy with implementing reparations, state versus national? Camilla came onto the show. She's a part of the California Reparations Task Force. They're trying to make things work there. Now, the state chapter of the NAACP came in and struck down the idea of giving Black people in California $5 million. They struck that down. It seems like they're trying to work on other things. But what do you think about some of these states and cities like my city, Boston, actually trying to do local reparation, task force and seeing what they could do for people in their area? Do you feel like that's enough, or do you feel like it's a good start? What do you feel should be the strategy, state by state or national?
So we go back to our 4 pillars. Reparations has as its central goal the elimination of the racial wealth gap.
For us.
This is in our thinking. No cities, no states have a budget sufficient to do that for their eligible population.
Unless they have very few Black people.
Maybe
State of Utah.
Maybe Utah could do it. And I don't know that Utah's motivated to do it. But any entities that have a significant population of Black Americans in U.S. slavery cannot afford to do it. So let's take, we may be able to dredge up in our brains Boston numbers.
Well, let's take all of them first.
Well, so there are 108,000 cities in the United States and 50 states. Okay. So all of them combined, the budgets of all of them combined, 108,000 cities and states and 108,000 cities and 50 states is less than $5 trillion. The racial wealth gaps elimination calls for $14 trillion. So you would need to take, 3 years consecutively, right, of all their total income, money that they use to run, to run their programs, to support their constituencies. 3 solid years back to back, all of the money going to reparation. That's not going to happen. They can't afford to do it. It's definitely not going to happen. It's an unrealistic thing. What we would prefer is that they, focus on issues that are specific to their locales, but call them racial equity initiatives. Can we reserve this term reparations for what we believe is a sacred mission, this federal program that would eliminate the racial wealth gap for Black Americans since U.S. slavery? Yes, we are delighted to see mass incarceration and over-policing of Black Americans across the country stop. We would be delighted to see the individuals who have been victimized by the police receive compensation for that. For folks who live near toxic waste dumps or who live, who are breathing every day the effluent from highway systems, to receive compensation for that. But these should be under, the cities or states' racial equity initiatives. This is different from reparations. There's a quotation from Malcolm X that we like to use, to refer to. He talks about, if you stick a knife in someone's back 9 inches, this is a horrible thing, right? So this would be, slavery, nearly 100 years of legal segregation, and then all of the atrocities and harms that Black people have endured since the Voting Rights Act up to this moment. So if you pull the knife out 3 inches, okay, so perhaps this is dealing with eminent domain cases in your town or state where Black people were disproportionately victimized, did not receive the value of their homes, did not receive sufficient funds to relocate. So that's pulling the knife out 3 inches. Then maybe you pull it out another 3 inches and you say, okay, now we're going to talk about the life expectancies of Black Americans of U.S. slavery versus white Americans. And we're going to compensate Black people, for the discrepancy. Then you pull the knife out completely. And so maybe now you're talking about providing some type of redress for people who are homeless. And we know that Black Americans are, the majority of folks who, much higher percentage of Black people are homeless, or houseless in this country. Yeah. So the knife is out, but you still have this gaping wound, right? And the gaping wound would be healed by reparations. So you need both. We need to have the knife pulled out, dramatically. And that would be this full array of programs that cities and states could offer to Black American citizens of U.S. slavery. But then reparations would be this federal piece, this federal program that's separate from that. We need both.
Yeah, and the cities and states are actually constrained in terms of how much they can fund with respect to this process that Kirsten is talking about of pulling the knife out. Because if they provide monetary compensation for the harms that have taken place within their borders, if you are comprehensive in covering all of those harms, and if you assign the requisite amount of money to them, you will be in another situation where the cities and states don't have the capacity to fund it. Cities and states are constrained by their tax revenue in a way in which the federal government is not. They have
to balance their budgets, basically,
or over time.
Yeah.
But the fundamental issue for the federal government in terms of what limits its spending is the danger of inflation or high inflation. And so we spend some time in the final chapter of our book talking about ways in which a federal program of reparations might be conducted so that you reduce the inflation risk. But the federal government is not constrained by taxes because it is a sovereign issuer of the national currency.
So I guess one of the questions I have in reference to the states, or the cities, for example, there was a study that was done by the Boston Globe a couple of years ago that said that Black people had a net worth of $8 in Boston, Bostonians.
We're laughing because that study wasn't done by the Boston Globe.
Huh?
It was done by
my research center in conjunction with the Boston Fed.
Really?
Yeah, that's our study, The Color of Wealth in Boston. Yes.
They average. Okay, I'm going to say something about that. Anyway, because that's how they
reported the study in the Boston Globe, but they were not the source of the data.
Aha. So anyway, I'm going to say something about that. But anyway, they said that, like white families had a net worth of over 200,000, things like that.
$40,000. Yep.
Yeah. So the new mayor of Boston, Mayor Michelle Wu, she's already made this announcement that they have this reparations task force and they're going to close this gap. One of the things I heard you say that the states are constrained by how much funding they have. Can't they resolve that by having a public bank?
A state level public bank?
Well, for example, we've had a couple of people come on the show that are really into public banking. They've talked about it. So for example,
I'm an advocate of public banking. We already have a public bank.
That exists.
The Federal Reserve Board is a public bank. It doesn't provide client services, but I'm in favor of there being a federal banking system that would provide client services in competition with the private sector.
Yeah.
But I don't understand what it means in terms of having state level bank.
So for example,
municipal level banks. I'm not sure.
So the Bank of North Dakota, for example, is a public bank. And one of the things that has been argued before by multiple people on this show is that the example of Medicare for all, people saying you can't do it through the states because the states still have to get the approval of the funding from Congress, right? Well, one of the ways that has been argued that you get around that is by having a public bank. So if that's the case, then a
Well, I
state
don't
like
know.
Where's the money come from?
The public banks at the state or local level would not have the authority to issue the national currency.
But for
They could
example,
not,
like,
because they're creatures of local government.
but I guess what I'm saying is like when we've talked to people who are from like North Dakota, they have been able to do things and get around like implementing like certain policies that do cost and they not having to think, well, how are you going to pay for it? And what they've told us is that they've been able to do that because they have the Bank of North Dakota, which is a public bank.
Well, unless that bank can issue the United States dollar on an independent basis, ultimately their banking system is functioning by deferring indebtedness to a later date.
Well, Roger asks, Dr. Darity and Mullen and Dr. Mullen, what about reinstatement of the Freedmen Bureau Bank?
Well, if you can make sure it doesn't collapse or be corrupt,
make sure that the board of directors don't make loans to their friends that are under collateralized.
Yeah.
I don't know how you guarantee that. My family on my mother's side actually lost money in that bank, and that's why a lot of Black people don't trust banks to this day. So, I think you still have some of the same problems.
Yeah, I think at the time, 60,000 depositors lost about $3 million.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
Very interesting. Well, I have one more question for you. One of the questions that's come up is I want to make it clear to people that reparations is not paid for by taxes. That's another thing that people are saying, like they don't want their tax dollars.
It doesn't have to be.
And that's why it has to be a federal project.
What about the corporations? Because this is another question that people constantly like bring my way. Some people feel that not just the federal government, but some people feel that the corporations should also pay reparations because they were able to profit off of slave labor. How do you feel about that?
If they want to do it voluntarily, sure.
But the thing too is corporations by themselves cannot afford to pay, cannot afford to retire, to eliminate the racial wealth gap. I mean, let's think about this for a moment. Say you had a group of, corporate CEOs and their boards who decided that they were going to contribute to a fund to retire the racial wealth gap. And they, in a rotating basis, put $1 billion a month into that fund. It would take a millennium for them to donate $14 trillion. It's a huge sum. It's a huge sum. Now, what they could do is use their money and their muscle to petition and lobby Congress for true reparations for Black Americans since U.S. slavery.
So could the states and localities.
So some localities do the same. And they could do that while they're doing their whatever other programs they're doing.
Yeah.
They could hire a first-rate PR firm and blanket the country, with information about, what reparations is and should be, and push for it. I think about the efforts that many people around the world were engaged in to pressure South Africa to end apartheid, and also to pressure European countries to, to release their hold on, all these African countries and Caribbean countries. It was all about money. It was all about money. The goodwill piece came after, right? But if corporations would say, we're going to use our muscle to help make this happen, that would be huge. That would be huge. So there is a role that they could play. People like one of our heroes, Mary Frances Berry, who advocated for this super fund of corporations that would contribute monies, to be used for reparations. They can't afford to make true reparations happen, but there's a lot that they could do to use their influence, to use their, their time and their connections to forward and advance the cause.
Now, there is something they could do that they could afford to do that would be significant, but it would not be reparations per se.
But the HBCUs.
Yes.
Yes.
They could build the endowments of historically Black colleges and universities so that they would be on a par with predominantly white institutions or historically white institutions in terms of the per student amount of endowment that the institutions possess.
So give some suggestions, some comparisons or some
Well,
possibilities.
so an easy set of comparisons is the state of Louisiana, where you could pair the two land grant institutions, which are Louisiana State University and Southern A&M. You could pair Tulane with Dillard University, two of the private schools. You could pair the Catholic schools, which would be
Xavier and
what's the Loyola
yes.
of New Orleans,
right.
And you could pair the two other universities that are in the state system. You could pair Grambling with the University of Louisiana. You could look at their per capita endowments, look at the difference, and the banking system definitely has the resources to make up that kind of difference, and they could do it throughout all of the states that have historically Black colleges and universities. So that would be a project that's feasible. It would be a project that's useful, but it would not be reparations.
Final question: the Japanese Americans that received some sort of reparations, those that were in the internment camps, that was approved and done by the federal government under Reagan, I believe. So why was it that the federal government seemed to have no issue with doing that for Japanese Americans that were part of the internment camps, but when it comes to African Americans, this is always, I know there's a bill in Congress. I've heard Clyburn been pressured on this multiple times, and he's starting to get kind of angry when people ask him about it now, but that bill's been there for 30 years. Why hasn't there been?
That's not a particularly good bill.
Yeah.
We're not going to get reparations if that bill is legislated, or we're not going to get true reparations.
But I'll say one thing though, the Japanese Americans redress effort took decades. It wasn't a quick fix. There was tremendous opposition.
Well, but ours is taking more than a century.
This is true, but I do want to be clear that it was not something that happened instantaneously. Tremendous amount of work had taken place. You had organizations like the Japanese American Citizens League that had fought, for decades to, first of all, have the truth of what happened to Japanese Americans be told, because Americans weren't really aware of that story. And to make it clear that Japanese Americans were not enemy combatants, that they were not in concert with Japan during World War II, and that the federal government knew that.
Yeah,
they were aware all along that the Japanese Americans were loyal to the United States, but they pushed this anyway.
Yeah, this is a country that treated Japanese Americans as if they were traitors,
right?
And treated the Confederates
like their heroes,
as if they were patriots. Yeah.
So, but to talk more about the comparisons, Japanese Americans at the point that reparations were made had, you had a situation where the United States government wanted to be on good terms with Japan, right? Black American citizens of U.S. slavery don't have a country or countries that are pushing for us. Right. Mm-hmm. This is why we say it would be a tremendous asset to have the African Union, African countries and Caribbean countries say, yes, we want this to happen for Black Americans of U.S. slavery. You're talking about a much, much smaller population. 20,000
people,
individuals
and
received.
They each received $20,000.
Now that was a case where they received universal payments, which is what we would advocate also.
Uniform
payments, but they were never enslaved in the United States. Yes, they were mistreated for decades, underpaid, brutalized, but they were not enslaved for centuries. So you can't really, you're comparing apples. You're not comparing apples to apples here.
Well, there was also some serendipity, right? Because
yes, because it turns out that one of the key relationships that moved the conversation significantly along. You had Alan Simpson, who was a legislator in Wyoming.
Senator from
Wyoming, as a child, was in the Boy Scouts,
right?
And he lived near, is it Heart Mountain, I believe?
Yeah, I think so.
One of the internment camps, and Norman Mineta.
He met Norman Mineta.
Norman Mineta's family was interned there, and they were scouts together, and came together in a jamboree. So they're like, I don't know, 8-10 years old, but they meet. And stayed in touch somewhat. But then many years later, they both find themselves, in these elected positions. And this conversation comes up. And so, it was just incredibly,
Simpson's a Republican.
He's a Republican. And Republicans were the ones who pushed this through.
Mineta
also Republican.
No, Mineta was a Democrat. But it meant that they had bipartisan support for it.
Yeah. But it is true that Republicans were the party that pushed that through.
Interesting. Well, thank you both so much for coming on. I'm pretty sure you've educated people a lot here tonight, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on, Sabby. Take care.
Take good care.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys. That was Dr. Sandy Darity and Kirsten Mullen. They co-wrote the book From Here to Equality. Thank you so much for that, Eric. From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans by William A. Darity and Kirsten Mullen. Definitely check that out, guys, if you get a chance to do so. Okay, we have a lot of stories to talk about tonight. Actually, this is 4 stories, 5 stories. No, we got a lot of stories to talk about tonight. I'm sorry. And we are doing call-in tonight. But I want to start off by, let me make sure I went through the chat. Thank you. Deneen says, I really appreciate Sabby bringing Dr. Mullen and Dr. Darity on her program. Thank you so much, Deneen. Thank you. And thank you for the super chat, Mary, to add the Jewish community to reparations too. That's true. But that was paid by Germany. That's another thing. Like that was paid by Germany, but I totally hear what you're saying. Thank you so much for that. Okay. Let's go ahead and shout out patrons, and then we'll go ahead and get to that beautiful thumbnail. Thank you guys so much. All right. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters, Sabbies. I always do Sabbies like that because there's a lot of you. Members. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. Keeps the lights on around me. Keeps it on around me. All right. What are we talking about tonight, guys? We got so much more to discuss. It's going to be a busy night, so I hope you have some popcorn ready. Tonight, we are discussing RFK Jr. Town Hall. I know some of you said in the chat there was a town hall. Yes, there was. We're going to talk about that. I'm also going to discuss Stacey Plaskett has deeper ties to Jeffrey Epstein than we may have realized. The cat's out the bag. We're also going to discuss the Donald Trump leak. We're going to get into that audio. And of course, Dr. Darity and Kirsten Mullen were also just here. So let's go ahead and dive in. I want to get started with this story about Donald Trump and this leaked audio. Now, I do want to say right off the bat, it was pretty interesting to me, the number of people who shared that video and poked holes at the audio and said, look, it's proof. It's proof. He knew. But there was one piece in this conversation, in this leaked audio, that I believe went unnoticed by a lot of people. And we need to talk about that. Let's go ahead and get started with this clip here from Anderson Cooper, diving into this Trump leaked audio story.
Good evening. We begin tonight with breaking news. We have obtained what is expected to be a central piece of the government's case against Donald Trump. The actual audio recording of the former president talking as if he's showing a highly classified document on U.S. war plans against Iran with people not clear to even know it exists, let alone what's in it. In a moment, only on CNN, you will hear what jurors will hear one day. The recording was made 2 summers ago, July 2021, at the former president's club in Bedminster, New Jersey. You will clearly hear the former president as he is speaking to several people. According to the special counsel's indictment, they include a writer working on Mark Meadows' memoir, the publisher, and 2 of Trump's staff members. The president was aware he was being recorded. This is the first time it is being played publicly.
I just want to pause right there and chime in for just a second. He just told you that Donald Trump was well aware that he was being recorded. So if this was something that I think Trump wanted to remain secret, notice the title of the video is "This is Secret Information." I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have said the things that he said. So just keep that in mind. He knew he was being recorded. It's not like this was a sneak attack. Listen to this.
These are bad, sick people.
That was your coup, against you.
Well, it started right at the
like
beginning.
when Millie's talking about, oh, you were going to try to do a coup. No, they were trying to do that before you even were sworn in.
That's right.
Trying to overthrow your election.
Well, with Millie, let me see that. I'll show you an example. He said that I wanted to attack Iran. Isn't it amazing? I have a big pile of papers. This thing just came up. Look. This was him. They presented me this. This is off the record, but they presented me this. This was him. This was the Defense Department and him.
Wow.
We looked at some. This was him. This wasn't done by me. This was him. All sorts of stuff. It's pages long. Look. Wait a minute. Let's see here.
Yeah.
I just found, isn't that amazing? This totally wins my case, Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information. Look at this. Your attack.
Let's pause right here. This is the part right here where a lot of people are focusing on. This statement here by Donald Trump where he says this is secret information. Look at this. This is secret information. A lot of people are taking this video and they're pointing just at that part and they're saying, see, he knew that those were secret documents and he was not supposed to obviously move them. But they're missing an important piece of this conversation, which happened right at the very beginning of the audio. And I think they're doing this on purpose. Let me go ahead and go back. I want to show you one of the most important pieces of this audio that people really need to pay attention to.
These are bad, sick people.
That was your coup, against you.
Well, it started right at the
like
beginning.
when Millie's talking about, oh, you were going to try to do a coup. No, they were trying to do that before you even were sworn in.
That piece right there. One of the most important messages from this audio is the fact that the Department of Defense, they were trying to push him to do a coup. They were trying to push him to start a war. And most people who listen to this audio, I've seen it all on social media, they looked right over this. Went whoop, right over their head. Right over their head. How do you miss that? It's at the beginning. Let's go on. Listen.
Right. Trying to overthrow your election.
Well, with Millie, let me see that. I'll show you an example. He said that I wanted to attack Iran. Isn't it amazing? I have a big pile of papers. This thing just came up. Look. This was him. They presented me this. This is off the record, but they presented me this. This was him. This was the Defense Department and him.
That piece right there as well. The mentioning in those documents that apparently Donald Trump wanted to start some conflict with Iran. And he goes on to say, no, that was him. Look at it here. That was him and the Department of Defense. I don't understand how people have looked right over this information. That's very problematic. Remember, yes, Trump is not innocent here. Yes, there were things that Trump did in reference to militarism, drone strikes, etc. Yes, he also aided, approved to give money to Ukraine as well. Not billions of dollars is happening now, but he didn't start any new wars. And this audio right here reveals that the Defense Department was trying to push him to do just that. And this goes right over everyone's head. Let's continue.
Wow. We looked at some. This was him. This wasn't done by me. This was him. All sorts of stuff. It's pages long. Look. Wait a minute. Let's see here. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
I just found, isn't that amazing? This totally wins my case, you know. Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information. But look at this. You attack, and
Hillary would print that out all the time, you know.
she'd send
Private
it. No,
email.
she'd send it to
Yeah.
Anthony Weiner.
Yeah.
The per-
See, they're laughing and making a joke about it here, but let's remember Hillary Clinton's emails, right? Bill Clinton also handled declassified information. It wasn't just Donald Trump who has done this. But of course, as we've known from history, the Clintons remain untouched, regardless of what they do. How else does Bill Clinton get to stay in office after having an affair with an intern in the White House? In the White House. How? They remain untouched. So why isn't Hillary Clinton being, dragged through the ringer for accessing those emails on a personal server? Why isn't she being, antagonized the same way that Donald Trump is? Why wasn't Bill Clinton being antagonized for also accessing declassified information? Why wasn't he brought through the ringer the same way that Donald Trump was? These are the questions that people need to ask. And by asking that question, that doesn't mean that you agree with Donald Trump. That doesn't mean that you support Donald Trump, but it does show you that there is a level of hypocrisy here. Let's go on.
Please print.
by the way, isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
I was just saying, because we were talking about it. And, he said he wanted to attack Iran and what? These are the
You did.
papers.
It's pretty-
This was done by the military, given to me.
That part right there. Wanted to attack Iran. This was done by the military and then given to me. It was the military who was pushing to do that. What did I tell you? The MIC. Maybe that's part of the reason why they're not too happy with Donald Trump. See, everything comes to light.
I think we can probably, right?
I don't know, we'll have to see. Yeah, we'll have to try to
Declassify.
figure out
it.
yeah.
See, as president, I could have declassified
Yeah.
it. Now I can't, but this is
Yeah,
classified.
now we have a problem.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's so cool. I mean, it's so, here and I have, and you probably almost didn't believe me, but now you believe me.
No, I believe
It's
you.
incredible, right?
No,
Hey, bring some Cokes in, please.
See this piece right here? Watch this.
I mean, it's so, here and I have, and you probably almost didn't believe me, but now you believe me.
No, I believe
It's
you.
incredible, right?
No, they never met a war they didn't want. You see that?
Hey, bring some Cokes in, please.
Well, joining us now, CNN anchor and chief correspondent Caitlin Collins, also our senior legal affairs correspondent Paula Reed. Caitlin, first of all, what do you make? This is the first time we are hearing this audio. We'd seen a transcript. There's more in this audio than we actually had seen, I think, in the transcript. What stands out to you?
Yeah, there is.
How do we know this is actually the first time they heard that audio? How do we know that? I saw the audio. I heard the audio on Twitter before it aired on CNN. So am I really supposed to believe this is their first time hearing this audio? Am I really supposed to believe none of these people on CNN actually access Twitter or Facebook or anything like that? I don't buy it. Listen
There's
to
more
this.
in this, and this is a 2-minute clip of what a recording that we're told is over an hour long. But this is, of course, the part that is at the center of Jack Smith's investigation. And we knew about this. CNN first reported that this existed and that Jack Smith's prosecution had it in their hands. But to hear it, I think really just drives home and it undercuts everything that Trump has been saying. I mean, even as of a few days ago, he was saying there was no document per se, but you can hear him very clearly in there referencing something in his hands.
You can hear him shuffling through papers.
And he's not just saying, here's this document. He very clearly appears to be showing it to them.
He
of
says,
course,
look.
Only the people in the room could know that, but you can hear in that why this is so critical to Jack Smith's case, because it's Trump acknowledging, I have this document, it is secret, it is classified, I cannot declassify it now because he's 6 months out of office. And it's just remarkable to hear him actually saying it. And I was talking to someone in Trump's orbit about this, because obviously a lot of people, several people in his orbit have heard it themselves when they found out about it in mid-March. And we were talking about comparing it kind of to the Access Hollywood tape, how if you just had a transcript of that, it wouldn't have been maybe as, controversial and contentious as it was when you could actually hear it. Yeah. Same with this. The fact that, we could read the transcript, but hearing it, I think, drives it home so much more.
So we're just going to ignore the fact that on that transcript, you actually hear him admit that the military was trying to push him into starting a war. We're just going to ignore that the military was trying to push him into starting a conflict with Iran. Do you see why mainstream media is so problematic? What I just told you is the same thing they should have told you. But they're not going to do that because they're in bed with the military industrial complex as well.
Paula, you've reported extensively on this case. What's your reaction to actually hearing that audio?
Anderson, it's remarkable how casual this conversation is. The former president knew he was being recorded during this meeting. His own aides were in the habit of recording him anytime he talked to journalists or people working on books. And in the room with him were two people who were working on an autobiography for Mark Meadows. But even though he knows he's being recorded, you hear him sort of casually discussing classified documents, admitting that he cannot declassify these. And then just a few moments later, calling to someone to bring them some Coke. It's very conversational. That's one of the things that really sticks out to me. And I think it's important for people to really hear exactly.
Then why do you refer to it as this is secret information? That's what it says. The title of this video, this is secret information. How is it secret when he knew that he was being recorded? Also, by the time that CNN reported this video had already made its way through Twitter. Okay. So Twitter first, CNN second. Honestly, that's usually when it comes to news, I'll see that shit circle and cycle on Twitter before I'll see it on CNN, just to be honest with you. So how was this secretive information? It wasn't. That was just a way to get people to click on this video.
Exactly what this sounds like. There's a lot of laughter in that recording as well. One of the other things that stands out to me is the fact that he and the people around him in that room were joking about former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server. That is something we previously didn't know about because it was not included in the indictment. Now, from a legal standpoint, it makes sense that prosecutors wouldn't include that, right? Because it's not incriminating, it's not really relevant to their case. But in the court of public opinion, the fact that he's making jokes about Hillary Clinton, other people in the room making jokes about Anthony Weiner as well, that I think really comes off as some hubris. We have the benefit of hindsight here, right? Now this is being used as a key piece of evidence in a federal prosecution.
And Caitlin, there.
You can't make jokes about Hillary Clinton? Is that what it? We can't make jokes about Hillary Clinton?
There is that moment where he says, that these are the papers, and you can hear them. And I want to play that again because it's instructive to actually kind of visualize what he's doing. Let's play this.
I was just saying, because we were talking about it, and he said he wanted to attack Iran and what? These are the papers. This was done by the military, given to me.
That wasn't in the indictment. That part of it, I think, was not in the indictment. Why do you think that is?
It's unclear. What he's talking about there, for people who aren't watching it super closely, is Chairman Mark Milley, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And he's basically saying, this is proof that he wanted to attack Iran, not me. We should note that the document that is in question here, we are told it was predated Milley. It wasn't actually something that he produced. But it speaks to something that we've heard, the former national security officials in Trump's orbit talk about, which is this is not just any kind of information, any kind of document. This is the nation's secrets, which don't just change on a daily basis. You don't just come up with a new attack plan for Iran.
In other words, they don't want you to know that they're trying to plan to start another conflict abroad.
He is just brandishing you proudly to random people in the room. These are random autobiographers who are working for Mark Meadows that are in the room. They don't have security clearances that he's showing this to. And I think this audio changed a lot about the way that Trump's legal team viewed this case. They told me, and Paula and I and our other colleague Kayla, we've been covering this for months. We had heard they weren't worried about this investigation, that they had this argument that, he just took what he had with him. It wasn't nefarious. He's trying to use that now, saying it's just golf clippings. You can see there, he knows exactly what he has. He knows that it's not declassified. It's his own words.
And it's why he is.
And so did Hillary Clinton, and so did Bill Clinton. They knew exactly what they had. They knew exactly what they were doing, but you do not see that same type of energy brought towards the Clintons, and it's a big part of the problem. Like I said, they always seem to remain untouched. It's not just the affair with Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, someone who's an intern. It's not just that. It's also the fact that there was the Whitewater scandal with the Clintons. Again, they always seem to just walk away unscathed, and people need to start asking why. Why is it that when they do these things, they get to walk away from it, but other people, how dare you? You're held accountable, or they try to hold you accountable in some way, shape, or form. So you have the Clintons. You also have Joe Biden, who also had to admit publicly a couple months ago that he had classified documents, some of them in his garage, he pointed out. So where's this same type of energy towards Joe Biden? You see why the problem with the mainstream media is so problematic here. They're so biased. And this is why people will say this is a witch hunt. This is why people will say that they're trying to make an example out of Donald Trump, because we don't see you applying it to other people who just happen to be a part of the Democratic Party. Something to think about. They really do believe that by revealing this type of information, this is actually going to make people not want to support Donald Trump and make him more unpopular in the public's eye. But that's not working. In fact, it's doing the exact opposite. It's making him more popular. That's why he's ahead of Joe Biden right now in the polls. Very interesting. Thank you so much for the super sticker, 2008 B. Scott. Dwayne says, such complete hypocrisy. And thank you for this. Notice how they deflect away from the fact that Trump wasn't interested in the war and towards petty legal technicalities. The MIC is not something they can discuss on CNN. Exactly. And that's what I want people to take away from that audio discussion. Not just the fact that he admits that he has classified information, but what he said was in the information, and the fact that the military was trying to push him to start another war. And that's what people need to take away from this. I'm sorry. It is what it is at this point. Okay, we're going to move on to our next story here. A while back, I told you about Stacey Plaskett. She's a delegate in Congress. She's not a congresswoman. She represents the Virgin Islands. She's a delegate. She's not really a ranking member. It's a long story about her connection to Jeffrey Epstein. And one of the things that was revealed is the fact that she had accepted donation money from Jeffrey Epstein for her campaign. And she at one point had refused to return that money even after it was revealed that he was convicted. Well, now it goes a little bit deeper, because now there is more information that has been revealed about Stacey Plaskett that shows that her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein is a lot deeper than we thought. And it was not just a donation that tied them together. There are more things at play here. But I also first want to remind you that she was the delegate that heavily went after Matt Taibbi during his congressional hearing about the Twitter files. Listen to this. Now, I want you to see this video here where it says Representative Jim Jordan's FBI witness testified publicly before Congress as questions about their legitimacy remain. She was on CNN. Now, this video, this was just 1 month ago. Just 1 month ago. Listen to this.
And Congresswoman Plaskett joins us now. Thanks for being with us. What exactly was going on from your point of view in that hearing room today?
Well, this is a very interesting select committee that has been put together by Kevin McCarthy. And its primary purpose, Anderson, is really to test case conspiracy theories that the Republicans have, and specifically that Donald Trump may use in his presidential election. So we've done the Twitter files investigation. We're looking at FBI supposed whistleblowers. That's the sum total of what is happening here. This is a really concerted effort to undermine Americans' confidence in the rule of law, in the Department of Justice, in the FBI.
They should be investigating her. Instead of calling Matt Taibbi to Congress, instead of calling these FBI witnesses to Congress, she should be testifying in front of Congress. That's the hypocrisy of all of this. She's on that committee to determine whether or not someone is doing something that's lawful. Are you kidding me? Same thing with Debbie Wiseman Schultz. She should have never been there, never been on that committee.
And can you just explain why you're saying that those witnesses are not actually whistleblowers and why you think Congressman Jordan is not giving you and Democrats on the committee all the information you're requesting? Because when Dan Goldman brought that up, Jordan, I looked at the transcripts, Jordan essentially said, yeah, we've just chosen not to give it to you.
Right. Well, the rules no longer apply. And specifically, my Republican colleagues don't think the rules apply when the rules don't help them. That's also what they've done with the FBI in other instances. They're not interested in working and finding out cases and issues that the FBI may have and how it may have misused its power. They're only interested when the FBI is going after or has put down individuals who espouse theories that they want to put forward, like a stolen election, like January 6th not having been an insurrection. So the issue we had with the witnesses that they brought forward today is that Jim Jordan and his other members of his party, particularly on that committee, would like us to believe that these individuals are whistleblowers. Whistleblowers are individuals who will be protected by the government because they are disclosing allegations of misconduct.
Is that true? Have these whistleblowers been protected by the government? How would John Kiriakis feel about that? There were multiple whistleblowers at the Julian Assange rally in DC last October that I spoke at. Did the government protect them? The FBI went to John Kiriakis' house. So what is she talking about? What is she talking about? Did the government protect Edward Snowden? Did they protect Daniel Hale? Did they protect Julian Assange? Chelsea Manning? This woman is very fake, and I hope you can see through her. And we're about to reveal something about her as well as to why I said she should not be on the committee in the first damn place.
The individuals that we saw today have not alleged any misconduct by the FBI. What they have alleged is that the FBI asked them to do their job and did not believe that January 6th was a regular day. The FBI believed that January 6th contained domestic terrorists and made these individuals act as federal law enforcement officers to go after and to investigate those individuals. And that's exactly what they did not want to do. Friend did not want to be involved in the arrest of an individual who they have known has been armed. We saw pictures of him in January 6th with assault weapons, canisters of tear gas, wearing protective mask himself. Other individuals that as you heard from the reporter, were downloading and disseminating to other FBI agents information that they knew were fallacious and not true, was told by the supervisor not to do it and continued to do it. And the third person recorded his supervisor when that is against the law for him to do that, and downloaded information and put it out there into the public. So these are not, as we would consider them, whistleblowers, people who are alleging wrongdoing. These are individuals who have a gripe with FBI, rightfully had their security clearances revoked because they were sympathizers of January 6th and other theories. And so now they are crying grievance because of that.
This woman is a tool, right? Explain something to me, ladies and gentlemen. How is it that someone who's not even a congresswoman, by the way, get this off your channel. Get this off your channel. This is her YouTube channel. Look at this. It says right here, Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett. This is her channel. You are not a congresswoman. You are a delegate. So explain something to me, ladies and gentlemen. How is it that someone who is a delegate, not even a ranking member, how does she get on these special committees? How does she get to have all these interviews? How does she get to make all these decisions about people who are whistleblowers and such? How did she get to do all this? She's a low-ranking member. But she was closer than we thought to Jeffrey Epstein. And shout out to Lee Fang. I think it's pronounced Fang. Lee Fang. Shout out to Lee. He's a journalist. He was the one who broke this story. New court filings show delegate, see there's Del, not Congresswoman, Delegate Stacey Plaskett, one of the most popular Democrats on MSNBC, not only lied about her year-long fundraising from Jeffrey Epstein, she also literally worked for Epstein's shadowy tax and political influence fixer before entering public office. Lee dropped the hammer. Let's go in. I'll make this a little bit bigger. House Democrat worked for Epstein's tax and political fixer. Let's go in. There she is. Democratic delegate Stacey Plaskett, a representative of the U.S. Virgin Islands in Congress, has distanced herself from convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, claiming she was completely unaware of his donations. You ever notice how when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein and all these people that are connected to him, all of them are unaware? You really expect me to believe that everyone that was connected to him that's been exposed didn't know anything about his donations or what was going on? Everyone is unaware. I had no idea. We weren't really friends. We went to dinner one time. Noam Chomsky. Bill Gates. I ate with him once. The unsealed documents outline a decade-long association involving direct solicitations for money, personal meetings, and employment at a law firm deeply connected to Epstein's shadowy network. Plaskett not only repeatedly sought financial contributions from Epstein and had multiple face-to-face encounters with him, but she also worked directly for a St. Thomas-based law firm that played a role in cultivating influence for Epstein's clandestine activities. Let's go on. In a deposition last month, Plaskett disclosed that she was introduced to Epstein by Erica Kellerhals, an attorney. I'm gonna make this bigger, sorry. Where did I go? Okay, Erica Kellerhals, an attorney who lobbied on his behalf and represented his business and philanthropic ventures. Kellerhals' significance goes beyond a casual connection. Before Plaskett's congressional tenure, she worked at Kellerhals Ferguson Cloblin PLLC, the boutique tax firm in the Virgin Islands from 2013 to 2014, a period in which Epstein was a major client. Plaskett's involvement with Epstein may extend further back, as she previously served as a counsel on the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority, the EDA, which granted Epstein $300 million in allegedly improperly obtained tax exemptions over the course of 2 decades. Asked during her deposition if she worked for Epstein or any Epstein-linked businesses while serving at Kellerhals law firm, which specializes in EDA assistant, Plaskett responded, "I don't recall." She should be the one testifying to Congress right now. By the way, I don't recall. It's just a weak statement. It's a statement that people use a lot of times when they don't really want to say the truth. They'll just say, "Oh, I don't recall." The 2 years during which she worked for Epstein's lawyer are notably missing from Plaskett's LinkedIn account. Oh, what do you know? There's a 2-year gap between 2012 and when she'd entered Congress in 2015. Now, why would that be? Emails and testimony, however, closely linked Plaskett's rapid political rise with Epstein's deep pockets. In 2014, Cecile, a close aide to Epstein, advised him to support Plaskett in her bid for Congress against local legislator Sean Michael Mullen. Sean is the one who came after you in the Senate hearing last week. He is nasty and needs to be defeated, and we have a friend in Stacey. Now, that came from Cecile. During the election, Epstein aides, including Darren, Leslie, Kellerhals, donated heavily to Plaskett, helping her overcome the loan by a mere 737 votes in what local press called one of the biggest upsets in Virgin Island politics. Now, if it's one of the biggest upsets, you should have known that there was money somewhere attached. That year, it's Caitlin. Casey? Yeah. Uh-oh. I'm sorry, guys. I skipped forward somehow. Oh, no. There we go. That year, Dijon wrote to Epstein to confirm that a $13,000 corporate donation planned for the Democratic Party would be made for the benefit of Stacey Plaskett. You see how this works, you guys? You scratch my back, we scratch your back, we get you into Congress. Plaskett courted more financial support and met with the convicted offender at his office in St. Thomas. According to the testimony, Epstein donated the maximum amount, the $5,400, to Plaskett in 2016 and donated again in 2018. If you would share this invitation with Jeffrey, I'd be much appreciative, wrote Plaskett on July 12, 2018, over email to Kellerhals and Leslie Groff, beckoning the financier to a New York City fundraiser with Michael Bloomberg. All these rich people are connected. Groff was Epstein's personal assistant who had been accused of helping Epstein recruit underage girls. Guys, follow the dots. But Stacey Plaskett doesn't recall if she worked for them or not. I would be grateful for his support and the support of those that he may direct to assist me. That's coming from Plaskett in an email that was subsequently forwarded to Epstein. And here's that email. From Stacey Plaskett, subject, Bloomberg invite for Plaskett for Congress fundraiser. That was July 12th, 2018. You see this? Good morning, Leslie. I'm going to say it like Stacey. Good morning, Leslie. If you would share this invitation with Jeffrey, I'd be much appreciative. I would be grateful for his support and the support of those that he may direct to assist me. I'll be in New York City the Thursday of the event through the weekend. Again, thanks, Stacey. Less than 2 weeks after the exchange, Epstein wrote a $2,700 check to Plaskett. Later that year, Yolanda Addison, then a Plaskett consultant who now serves as executive director for the Congressional Black Caucus PAC, continued to write to Epstein requesting his support at several Plaskett campaign fundraiser events. Where is the push and the call to remove Stacey Plaskett from Congress? Where's the push and the call? Where's the push and the call to make Stacey Plaskett testify before Congress on the committee that she's a part of? Where's the call for that? Do you see how corrupt the corruption? This woman, this is the same woman who threatened to send Matt Taibbi to prison. She has no accountability right now. She has no right to sit on that committee and to determine whether or not someone else is a whistleblower or not, or if they're in the right or the wrong. She's sitting in Congress. If you haven't had a chance to do so, follow Lee. He's on Substack. He used to write for The Intercept. I don't think he does anymore, but he's been doing really great work. Follow him on Substack. That's all I got to tell you. That's freaking crazy. More information keeps coming out about her. I don't know what else to tell you guys, but I thought that one story I covered where I revealed that she took money from him and after he was going to refused to give the money back. I thought that was a doozy, but no. She goes in deep with that relationship with Epstein, and that should be concerning. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button, guys. That helps me with the algo. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. We're moving on to our next story here. Oh, thank you, Desert Mantis. Great investigative journalism by Lee Fong. I know, right? He's killing it, by the way. He's been killing it recently. And Cryosynth says delegates are more expensive than senators. Well. All right. We're going on to this next story about RFK Jr. Now, to my surprise, there actually was a town hall with RFK Jr. Some people didn't know about it because it wasn't on mainstream media, but News Nation actually decided to host an RFK Jr. town hall. Now, News Nation is a network on YouTube. This is the network that Chris Cuomo actually is at now, and a bunch of other people that I don't know, to just be honest. But they're almost at, I think, subscriber wise, like they have over 881K subscribers. So they're up there like with that Breaking Points level. They still have bias. I'm just going to be honest with you. They still do have their bias, but they are less biased than CNN and MSNBC, but they still have that bias there. I'm just going to keep it real. But I will say kudos to them for volunteering to do a town hall, because obviously CNN doesn't want to do it. MSNBC doesn't want to do it. Maybe Fox will do one. I don't know. But there were a couple of questions that RFK Jr. did respond to last night that I do want to focus on. The very first one, let's just go ahead and get this out the way, because the number of people who have made criticisms about his voice, the way that he talks. Why is he talking like that? Why doesn't he clear his throat? His throat. Clear his throat. Well, he was actually asked about that last night. And so I'm going to play this. Let's get this out the way so no one will ask this question again. Okay. Here is RFK Jr. explaining why his voice sounds the way that it does.
Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has his sights set on something that hasn't been done in modern U.S. history, beating the sitting president for his party's nomination for the White House. And so far, he's off to a solid start, polling at 15% against Joe Biden in a recent Emerson College poll. His connection to what is akin to American political royalty is right there in the name. RFK Jr.'s statements, however, on issues like vaccines and public health have critics calling him a conspiracy theorist, and others asking if he is the right person for the most important job in our nation, possibly the world.
I just think it's really funny that she says critics are, criticizing his takes. They're the critics. You are the critics.
Still, Kennedy believes it's his ability to take on that established power that American voters want. And that's why tonight is about you, the audience. It is your chance to ask questions and hear directly from Kennedy about the issues that matter most to you. live and unedited, and no topic is off limits. We've brought together Democratic and independent voters right here in Chicago, as well as in New Hampshire and South Carolina, the first states to cast their primary ballots in 2024. But first, everyone, please welcome me in joining Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to the stage. That is a warm Chicago welcome. Let's get this part out of the way. Your voice is raspy. Why don't you explain to our audience why?
I had a very, very strong voice till I was 46 years old. It was unusually strong. And I was, even at that time, I was making a lot of my income doing public speaking. And I could speak to large halls without any amplification. And then in 1996, when I was 42 years old, I got struck with a disease, a neurological disease, an injury called spasmodic dystonia. And it makes my voice tremble. And I actually, at the time, I didn't know what was wrong with it. But when I would go on TV, people would write me letters and say, you have spasmodic dystonia, and you should see Dr. Blitzer, who is the physician who was most famous for treating it. And I ultimately went to see him, and he confirmed that I had the diagnosis. So it makes it, I think it makes it problematical for people to listen to me. I cannot listen to myself on TV. I will never listen to this broadcast, and I won't listen to any. So I feel sorry for you guys having to listen to me.
All right.
But I'll say one other thing, that my throat was much worse. And I went to Japan with Cheryl about 6 months ago and had a novel surgery that they only do in Kyoto. And it made my voice much better, which you probably won't believe, but it was much worse than this before. So.
Thank you for watching. Go to News Nation now.
Okay. So and now that we've got that out of the way, so hopefully no one else will ask me that question again. Let's get that question out of the way. Now I want to go to another question, and this is causing quite a stir, at least on social media. You know, Donald Trump actually has had good things to say about RFK Jr., that he actually likes him and respects him. So, of course, that was one of the questions that they did ask RFK Jr. last night. I want you to hear his response to that. And honestly, I think this is the correct response. Listen to this.
You say that you're a Democrat, but you're getting a lot of support from a lot of leading voices on the right, like Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, former President Donald Trump. Many Democrats fear that you're a spoiler in the race, that you will damage President Biden in the primary and grease the skids for former President Trump to return to the Oval Office. This week.
Let's just pause here for a second. This piece right here, I'm sorry, I have to say something about this.
You will damage President Biden in the primary and
people fear that you will damage President Biden in the primary. That's the point. That's why he's running for president. What kind of question? What is that? What kind of statement is that? You think he's running in the primary to make things work for Joe Biden, to help Joe Biden? No, you challenge a politician in a primary because you don't think that they're doing a good enough job, because you want them gone. You want them to lose. You don't primary challenging them because you want them to win. This is the craziest thing I ever heard of. It's like when I played sports, it's like I never went to a game, wanting my competitor to win. I went to those games to beat their ass. I'm sorry, but that doesn't make any sense.
Grease the skids for former President Trump to return to the Oval Office. This week, former President Trump said about you, Kennedy is smart and he's a common sense guy. What kind of man do you think Donald Trump is?
Well, here's what I'm not going to do in this race. I'm not going to attack other people personally. I don't think it's good for our country. And I think, what I'm trying to do in this race is bring people together, is to try to bridge the divide between Americans. And guess what? The when my dad died and we took this train ride from, this 7.5-hour train ride that was supposed to be 2 hours, I was with him when he died in Los Angeles, and then we brought his body from New York, Penn Station to Union Station and Washington, D.C. And it was a 2.5-hour ride, but it took 7.5 hours because there were 2.5 million people on that train track. And it was the cross-section of America and all of the major urban stations in Trenton, Newark, Wilmington, and Baltimore. There were Black Americans singing Battle Hymn of the Republic. There were whites in the rural areas who are holding up signs, "Goodbye, Bobby," "Pray for us, Bobby," American flag, standing, saluting. 4 years later, and they had supported my father in the primaries in 1968. 4 years later, in 1972, they were not supporting my father, and they were not supporting George McGovern, who was aligned with my father on all these issues. Instead, the vast majority of them were supporting George Wallace. Mm-hmm. And, my father was able to harness these populist energies. In the last day of his life, he won the most rural state in this country, South Dakota, and the most urban. He was able to bridge the divide among people who would otherwise be Republican, but wanted somebody who was common sense, who was able to appeal to their idealism, who was able to find the hero in each of them, who was able to get them to transcend narrow self-interest and see themselves as part of a community and part of this, incredible American adventure in modeling self-governance for the rest of the world. And so I'm proud that President Trump likes me, even though I don't agree with him on most of his issues.
That piece right there, I think that's the best way to answer that question, because that really just upsets, that will upset the Democrat pundits for real. Because the thing is, they don't want him to say that. What they really want him to do is they want him to trash Donald Trump. They want him to he said he doesn't want to make personal attacks. They want him to make personal attacks at Donald Trump. You can beat your competitor without making cheap shots and without making personal attacks. Again, another sports analogy I'm going to use here. I played sports. A lot of you, some of you probably played sports. And that was one of the things that my coach taught us. You don't have to make personal attacks like some people would trash talk on the court. You don't have to make personal attacks at your opponent in order to beat them. You can beat them just by playing the game. And so he can criticize Donald Trump's policies without attacking him personally. That's not what News Nation wants to hear. CNN don't want to hear you say that. MSNBC don't want to hear you say that. They want you to attack Donald Trump. When you start preaching this message of talking to people who don't always agree with you and unifying people, that's what gives them pause. Because how do you respond to that? What is your follow-up question after that? If you're trying to get them, what do you say? He wants to bring people together. That means you have to talk to people that don't agree with you. And some people may not like that. But how are you going to unify? Like Joe Biden said, he was running the soul of the country. How are you going to unify people if you're not even willing to talk to people that disagree with you? What is this, a half unity? So think about that for a second. So I thought that was the best way that he could answer that question. Obviously, he mentions his father was able to do the same thing.
Because I don't want to alienate people. I want to bring people together. I'm proud that all these people like me and that I have independent supporters and Democratic supporters and that I'm able to bring a lot of people. Every Democrat says, I want to end the polarization. But how do you do that without talking to people who don't agree with you? How do you do that without appealing to people? My purpose is to find the issues, the values that we have in common, rather than, focus on the issues and the personalities that keep us all apart.
Thank you for watching.
I'm sorry, it keeps playing that part. I hate that. But yeah, Leroy's correct. It was a mature response. Exactly. That's not what they want to hear. They want you guys to fight. They don't want, because when you start talking to people that you may disagree with, politically disagree with, then you may start to realize maybe you do have some commonalities there. particularly if we're talking about like a class issue, and they don't want you to have that discussion. Now, the next question that he dives into is the immigration issue, the border. I want you to hear how he responds in reference to this, because I think that, you know, RFK Jr. did go to the border and he recorded himself while he was down there. And he said, like, look, we have a problem here. The border is not like protected the way that he feels that it could be, right? This isn't something that's new, though. Like, we've had this issue for a long time. Now, we'll say in reference to that issue, well, then maybe instead of just addressing, you know, closing off the border, which I don't think that's going to fix the problem, closing off the border, maybe we should also be asking this question. Why are so many people coming in the first place? What's happening in their home countries? What is the U.S. government, what has the military done to their countries to the point where they don't even safe there anymore? They're willing to make a dangerous trek to get across the border to come into this country. And I think if you're going to talk about immigration, and I'll just keep this real, if you're going to talk about immigration and the issue at the border, you have to connect that to the militarism that is happening abroad in those countries and the imperialism as well. And I think if you can do that, I think you can win over a lot of people.
Mr. Kennedy, you were recently at the border. You toured it to get a firsthand look. You called it a dystopian nightmare and said that you would seal the border. And I want to go now to our first question from the audience, Josue from Chicago.
Hello, I'm the son of Mexican immigrants and the husband of a Honduran immigrant. And so my question is on immigration. With Congress unable to reach an agreement on comprehensive immigration reform in decades, what is your plan to address immigration?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and thank you, Josue. Is it Josue? Yes. Okay, I don't think that it's going to be possible to get an immigration reform package through Congress until we seal the border. Because we've got now in the last 3 years, 7 million people have come across the border illegally. And the most disturbing part of me is I witnessed the humanitarian crisis, the cruelty to these people who are being brought to the border. They're being exploited, they're being extorted, they're being raped, they're being robbed. The cartels are now running U.S. immigration policy, and everybody knows that. And there have been 9. We were told by the Border Patrol there have been 9 suicides of Border Patrolmen in the last year.
I have to jump in here for just a second because I do want people to really understand this. Sealing the border does not prevent people from coming into the country illegally. And I want to give you an example of one of the easiest ways that people can come into the country illegally: by plane. You see, a lot of people think that people were coming across the country or coming into the country illegally on foot, like walking across the border. Yes, those things do happen. But a lot of people come into the country illegally via plane. So this is why I want to be very clear about this. Sealing off the border, that does not prevent people from coming through on the airlines. And yes, it does happen. It happens more often than you would realize because a lot of people don't talk about that. They show you the video footage of immigrants coming across the border, across the southern border. That's easy to do. What they don't show you is the video footage of immigrants coming into the country illegally via plane. And that's why a lot of people assume that most of it is coming on foot. That's actually not true. Most of it is coming via plane, guys, in the air. Let's go on.
Because they're so demoralized about what's happening. They are literally, it took me 3 days at the border to understand what's happening. The first night I watched, I got there at 2:00 in the morning, stayed there until about 4. And I watched just hundreds and hundreds of people coming across. The first group was about 60 African men from West Africa, mainly from Cameroon. I thought I was going to see Central Americans and, Guatemalans and Salvadorians, but I didn't. We only saw, in the whole night, there was only 2 families from Latin America, one from Colombia and one from Peru, and all of them had been brutalized and every penny taken away from them. The rest of them were from Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan.
Kazakhstan, Tibet, Nepal, Pakistan, and many, many from China. The cartels are now advertising all over the world that there's an open border, and they are bringing people in. They give them videos about exactly what to do. They fly to Mexico. They're given visas there, internal visas in Mexico. They go from Mexico City on a plane to Mexicali. They're loaded on fleets of buses and then brought to the border. They cross. The only role of the Border Patrol is to stamp them in and check if they have a criminal record. If they don't, they are brought to the airport and they are given a ticket to any city in the United States that they want to go to.
Well, this is a good point, Elsie. Yes, after their visas expire. That's another thing, too, because once you're here, you're here. Now, obviously, you're not supposed to stay here after your visa expires, but people do. So that's a good point. Thank you for that, Elsie. I forgot to mention that. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the video.
You have to demonstrate need and apply for asylum.
No, they're given a court date. And the court date is a cursory court date. It's like an arraignment. And then their real court date, which they're not going to show up to, is 7 years later.
But I think the question that we need to ask here, even when she's bringing up like the asylum issue, right? People should be able to come to they're allowed to come to the border and, via asylum. But why are they coming to seek asylum? This is the piece of the puzzle that is often left out of the conversation. Why are they coming here seeking asylum? What is happening in their country? Why are they fleeing their countries? The number of times I hear people have this discussion and they leave that piece out is very important.
So they're essentially given a 7-year pass to stay in this country.
So how would you seal the border?
Well, you know what? It's not that hard. Because
how would you do it?
I would do it. I mean, there's a number of things that you have to do. I was against Trump's wall, but having seen it down there, I see that you were required to give a physical barrier during certain, not all the way 2,200 miles from San Diego to Brownsville, Texas, but certain highly densely populated areas, you need a physical barrier. But in the hinterlands, in the wilderness areas, you can use sensors like they do in Israel, like ground sensors and towers.
There's sorts of AI breakthroughs too. But you would resume the building of Trump's border wall?
Well, a lot of it now has been rebuilt. Mayorkas, who's the DHS secretary, recognized that the gaps in that wall, that we shouldn't have left them. But it's not.
So this is where Bobby Kennedy should have came in when she said she's trying to do a gotcha. When she says, oh, you would continue Trump's border wall. This is where he should have came in and said, well, Biden has been building onto Trump's border wall. That would have been a good chance for him to throw like a, kind of cheap shot there at Joe Biden. But then also, I want to tell you guys, these walls don't work. Building walls, people will still find a way in. So again, like I've said before, we need to address the root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem is that their countries have been destroyed. Why do you think there were thousands of like Haitian migrants like trying to come across? There's nothing left for them to go back to. And most of the time it's been destroyed by our government. These walls, that's not the answer. The answer is not to create a big wall. Ask Germany, ask East Germany and West Germany how well that wall worked out. And don't come for me on that. I lived in Germany. So the thing is, ask them how well that wall, people still got over the damn wall. So this is something that people need to address.
So much the wall, it's the other censoring devices that were all ripped up. Which I'm very embarrassed to say by this administration, by the Democratic administration. And also the policies were changed so that the presumption is everybody gets in. And I witnessed it myself. And we can't have that.
Everybody's not getting in.
Yes, everybody gets in.
There are crowds of people waiting to try and apply through the new app that the Biden administration has set up. They're setting up.
As for legal immigration.
Oh, you're talking about illegal immigration.
I'm talking illegal immigration. Everybody.
Of course he's talking about illegal immigration. Why do you think he's talking about sealing the border and the wall? Yikes. She lost it, huh?
Gets in. I watched it. 7 million people have come in. Just the one little section I was at in Yuma, There's 350,000 people came here before, but I met with the human authorities, I met with the hospitals, I met with the centers that take care of the immigrants who are, beleaguered. I met with the Border Patrol and the sheriff, and everybody agreed it could be stopped. It could be wound down to what it was before this administration, which was about 25 people a day, which is not a big problem. But having now it's 300 to 800 a day. And that, no nation can survive if they can't protect their borders. As president, I will expand legal immigration. I will make it easier, particularly for workers to come across on the H visas and then, and bring in and have an orderly system that benefits our country. Immigration is good for our country. This kind of immigration is unfair to everybody, and particularly to the immigrants that have been brought here. And then over the long term, the immigrants that have poured in from Latin America, a lot of them are coming up because of policies, wrongful policies that the U.S. has had, the drug wars, the austerity programs, the support of juntas, the war on the poor that we've maintained for so many years, and we need to change those policies as well.
Yeah, but I don't know about that view right there. Like I really don't. I really hope that he does not believe that this is going to be the solution, because and you can study this. If you look up history, you can study other countries that have had these strict border access or had a wall or whatever. People still will find a way to get in. And my thing is just like, what is the underlying issue? There's also a very significant focus of Mexico, people coming from the southern border, right? People come from Canada. Canada's not, look, I'm in Massachusetts. Canada's not far from me, believe it or not. I could drive to Montreal like that, boo. It's not far from me. People come across the Canadian border illegally too, but you don't hear about that. You don't hear about that as much. But I don't think the answer, the solution, is sealing people off. I don't think that's the answer. Next question that he goes on to, and this one really could cause the stir to people. RFK Jr. explains why Democrats should vote Joe Biden out of office. Now, this is a big one. Listen to this.
Before that, though, I want to say you're asking Democratic voters in this room and across the country to do something that hasn't been done in 167 years in this country, to vote out a president of their own party. Not to mention replace him with somebody who hasn't even held elective office. Why should they take that chance?
Who cares if they've held elected office? Some of the clowns that we've had in DC that have held elected office for decades don't do shit. Let's just be real. How great of a job are they doing? How great of a job is Joe Biden doing? And he's been a politician for over 40 years. At this point, I don't care if you've held office or not. In fact, I might prefer that you have not, because then I know you're not a part of the machine. Interesting.
I'm running because I feel like my party has lost its way. That the values that my uncle represented, my father represented when they were Democrats, have been neglected, let's say. And I want to try to bring the Democratic Party back to those values, the values that were, in favor of focused on the middle class in this country, focused on labor, on racial, on the well-being of minorities in this country, focused on the environment, particularly on civil liberties and freedom of speech, which the party seems to have forgotten about. And the party traditionally was anti-war as well. My uncle, President Kennedy, was asked by his best friend what he wanted on his epitaph, on his gravestone, and he said he kept the peace. He said the principal job of an American president is to keep the country out of war. And the Democratic Party has represented those views since its inception. And I think,
Great part, biggest job of the president is to keep the country, to keep the peace, to keep the country out of war. We haven't heard that. I haven't heard that my whole life.
Particularly what we're doing now in Ukraine is a departure from that. And I don't mean that, I'm very, very sympathetic to the Ukrainian people, and I am not sympathetic to Putin, who invaded the Ukraine brutally and illegally and unnecessarily. But we have neglected many, many opportunities to settle this war peacefully. And by the way, my son, Connor, went over to the Ukraine and fought for a special forces unit. He was a machine gunner, and he fought in the Kharkiv offensive. And so I, myself and my family are very, very sympathetic to the Ukrainian people. I think.
Are you very, very sympathetic to the Palestinian people? Because it doesn't seem that way. It seems like, the response is, I support, their ambition. I support their efforts, is usually a response from him. Are you very, very sympathetic to the Palestinian people? That is one of the questions that I would ask. If I interviewed him, that is one of the questions that I would ask.
The way that we have conducted the war is bad for the Ukrainian people. It's terrible for the Ukrainian people.
Thank you for watching. Go to News Nation.
I hate that they do that after everyone. Okay, so that question there, it was really interesting to me the way that she worded that. Like, you're asking the American people to do something that had never been done before. A lot of things hadn't been done before. Let's talk about things that weren't done before. At one point in time, we sent a man to the moon. It wasn't done before. Do you not try? Because it wasn't done before. These people want to maintain the status quo. And speaking of maintaining the status quo, this is probably the question that made people want to pull their hair out the most. He is asked that dreaded question, will you support Joe Biden if he is the nominee? Dun, dun, dun. Listen to this.
As a lifelong Democrat, as you just said very passionately, will you pledge to support whoever the Democratic nominee is, whoever it is, whether it's you, whether it's President Biden?
Oh, of course.
That didn't make any sense. Hold on, let's go back. She said, whether it's you. Hold on.
As a lifelong Democrat, as you just said very passionately, will you pledge to support whoever the Democratic nominee is, whoever it is, whether it's you, whether it's President Biden?
Whether it's you, why would he not support himself? Will you support the Democratic nominee, whether it's you, Joe Biden, whoever it is? Why would he not support himself? Somebody explain this to me. Come on.
Of course I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to
do that.
No, of course I'm not.
So
Listen,
if you don't get the nomination, you won't support President Biden?
I don't know what I'll do. Let's see let's see what happens in this campaign. Let's see, if people are living up to democratic values and having debates. And
we're going to go back to that one because it was the way the response to me was funny. Hold on. I totally hear you as well, Marco. No, I would not support my own run for the president.
Whoever it is, whether it's you, whether it's President Biden?
Of course I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to.
So, very straightforward answer. Of course, I'm not going to do that. Now, he's referring to Joe Biden. Listen to this, though.
No, of course I'm not. Listen,
if you don't get the nomination, you won't support President Biden?
I don't know what I'll do. Let's see let's see what happens in this campaign. Let's see, if people are living up to democratic values and having debates and having discussions and, talking to each other, but I'm not going to buy.
And if you feel that's not happening, would you then support a Republican or run as an independent?
See how she then pivots to, are you going to support the Republican candidate if you're not going to support the Democrat candidate? You see how they do this? You can choose not to support any of them. Any of them. She goes, are you going to then run as an independent? Like, the look on her face is hilarious to me. Like, but We'll go back because there's something I remember from another interview. We'll go back.
What my plan is to win this election, and I don't have a plan B.
Okay.
Thank you for watching.
All right. I want to show you something. There's a slip up here. Watch this.
It's President Biden.
Oh, of course I'm not going to do that. I'm not
going to do that.
No, of course I'm not.
So
Listen,
if you don't get the nomination, you won't support President Biden?
I don't know what I'll do.
All right. So first he says, no, I'm not going to do that. Then she says, if you don't get the nomination, you're not going to support President Biden. He said, I don't know what I'm going to do. But that's interesting because in the first Breaking Points interview, when he was asked that question, his response was, I don't see myself supporting anyone who's for the war. So I have the feeling that he does not want to do that, but I feel like for whatever reason, he's holding back a little bit and saying explicitly, I will not support Joe Biden, period. You know, he could have been advised not to say it explicitly. It could have been Dennis Kucinich's campaign manager. He was in Congress. He was part of the Democratic Party. Maybe Dennis Kucinich gave him the heads up. Look, whatever you do, you might want to be careful how you answer that question. Don't say explicitly that you're not going to support Joe Biden. That's why I felt like he walked it back a little bit and said, I don't know what I'm going to do. But in the Breaking Points interview, the very first one, he said, I don't see myself supporting anyone who supports the war. So let's go on.
Let's see let's see what happens in this campaign. Let's see, what if people are living up to democratic values and having debates and having discussions and
that part there sounds a little bit similar to what Marianne Williamson said when she said it depends on how they treat me.
Talking to each other, but I'm not going to buy.
And if you feel that's not happening, would you then support a Republican or run as an independent?
You know what? My plan is to win this election, and I don't have a plan B.
Now, there's a piece from this that's missing. Let me pull this up. I noticed this from their clip versus the one that Pasta had. So I just want to make sure you hear the full thing. Because I noticed this. I'm like, why did they cut out? They didn't play the entire thing. So let me see where Pasta posted that one. Give me just a second. And I can't talk about, obviously, you guys know on YouTube, I can't talk about what he said in reference to the jab. I'm sorry. Here it is. Okay. Let me come out of here and let me play the part from Pasta. I just want to make sure you get the full thing. Yeah, I'm gonna move this here so I can get the Bernie thing. Okay, here we go. Because Pasta hosted this last night. So here we go.
The interesting thing I thought, Chris, I'm not sure what your highlights were, but I found it very interesting that he refused to pledge to back whoever the Democratic nominee of the party is. I think, in fact, we have a clip. As a lifelong Democrat, as you just said very passionately, will you pledge to support whoever the Democratic nominee is? Whoever it is, whether it's you, whether it's President Biden?
Oh, of course I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. No, of course I'm not. Listen,
if you don't get the nomination, you won't support President Biden?
I don't know what I'll do. Let's see let's see what happens in this campaign. Let's see, what if people are living up to democratic values and having debates and having discussions and, talking to each other, but I'm not going to buy.
And if you feel that's not happening, would you then support a Republican or run as an independent?
You know what? My plan is to win this election, and I don't have a plan B.
The interesting.
Okay, now let me make sure I didn't miss, because I just want to make sure. Okay, so that was the same ending that he had as well. So Pasta said at the latest town hall, RFK refused to blindly pledge his backing to the Democrat if he should win the nomination. By the way, Pasta will be here tomorrow night, so we'll get to talk about this as well. Now, why is that important, and why do I focus on that? Because remember how I told you there's this pledge that they sign, this form that they sign or whatever? Someone tag me in this. Thank you so much. This was the form Bernie Sanders signed. I want to show you something. All right. First of all, let's see. It says Bernie Sanders, and this was 2019. Okay. Listen to what this says. I hereby affirm that upon publicly announcing my candidacy for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States in the 2020 election, I am a member of the Democratic Party. I will run as a Democrat, accept the nomination of my party, and I will serve as a Democrat if elected. I understand that signing this form does not supplant any legal or party requirement by any state or territory to qualify for ballot placement in that jurisdiction. Now, here's the kicker. Further, I acknowledge that the national chairperson of the Democratic National Committee is authorized to determine whether a presidential candidate has established substantial support for their nomination as the Democratic candidate for the office of the President of the United States, is a bona fide Democrat whose record of public service, accomplishments, public writings, and or public statements affirmatively demonstrate that the candidate is faithful to the interests, welfare, and success of the Democratic Party of the United States and will participate in the convention in good faith. This piece right here. The DNC is authorized to determine whether a presidential candidate has established substantial support for their nomination as the Democratic candidate of the office of the President of the United States. This just proves to you what I've been telling you and what the Becks, the lawyers, the Becks who came on the show, the ones that filed the DNC fraud lawsuit, this just backs what they were trying to explain to you. At the end of the day, it is up to the DNC. This is what they signed. Now, I don't know if they're still signing this today, but Bernie Sanders signed this, and you'll see this is his signature. This was 2019. He signed it. It was also notarized. You see the notary there? Okay. All right. So, what does that tell you? That at the end of the day, no matter how good of a candidate you are, the DNC is the one that makes the decision. Just like the DNC decided to give superdelegates to Hillary Clinton, even after Bernie had won every county in West Virginia. They can do that. They argued this in court. This is why you can't do it through the Democratic Party. This is what I was trying to tell you guys. So Bernie Sanders knew that as well. Okay? When he signed this form, he knew this as well. So this is what RFK Jr. is going to run up against. At the end of the day, the DNC makes the decision, and the DNC has decided to go with Joe Biden. And that's why I said RFK Jr. should not run through the Democratic Party. He should be running as an independent or third party. But that's obviously not happening. And mark my words, if he starts to get higher than 20%, oh, they're going to pull all kinds of trickery, but they're going to get Obama up in that mofo. They're going to try to do everything. Everything. They're already starting. That's why they're starting with the smears early. But yes, there was a town hall with RFK Jr. last night. And I noticed from the comments, it seems like a lot of people didn't know about it. But it did happen. So you can probably find the full one on YouTube. Interesting. Let's go to the comments. Exco? News Nation tries to be middle of the road. Interesting. LB says RFK visited the border, something Joe Biden wouldn't do, or Kamala. That's true. Sharon, write him and tell him that, Sabby. Get Kim to email him. Yeah, man. I invited him on the week that he announced, like when I covered his campaign on the ground. When I covered his announcement on the ground here in Boston, like I asked for him to come on back then. And like every couple of weeks, I'll get like an email from his press team, not from him, from his press team saying, you're in the queue. And I'm like, yeah, I know I'm in the queue, but it's pretty obvious that the bigger outlets, he's going to go onto those first. That's what's been happening. So he probably will you probably will never see him on here. If so, be very surprised. Hell, I'll be surprised for you. Cryosynth, Bernie signed that pledge on behalf of his supporters, especially the ones who supported him financially. Mizu, Sabby Sabs, if I was RFK Jr., I would gaslight them until the end, then sucker punch them with a third-party announcement. I don't even know if you can do, see, that's the other thing. I don't even know if you can do that. Like, if you agree to support, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what happens. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I'll take the comment on Rockfin and then we'll go to the next. We'll have to do finish Oregon tomorrow night because I just looked at the time. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin hemp. I never thought Goodman or Chomsky would have sold out. I hope Dr. West and RFK Jr. don't either. One's deplorable on praising person who will not be named because we're on YouTube. The other is on Palestine and Ukraine. Together, they're getting out the fuller truth. I'm most concerned about the human gene pool and this mad push to use, I'm just going to let that say there for everything. Transhumanists literally want to end humanity. Bill Gates is the guess who. Interesting. Okay. I'm going to do something a little bit different tonight. Some news came my way yesterday that I was really surprised to hear. I think it was like 2 weeks ago. I told you guys, I think it was on Call-In. I told you that there was someone that I knew that was not, they didn't grow as fast on YouTube, but when they got onto TikTok, they actually just took off and like went viral and everything. That person was Brittany. I just found out recently that unfortunately, Brittany actually died in a car accident with her mother. I want to do a little tribute to her. So I'm going to show you the story so you can see what happened. And then I'm going to show you some of the things that Brittany has done. I think like as creators in this space, commentators, creators, whatever, I think we really need to come together, especially in these times. She was the first person that I interviewed, very first guest. And you'll see that. But first, I want to show you the news that was announced the other day. I'm still really surprised by this.
People at the scene told her her mother's arms were wrapped around her sister when they got there.
I'm getting through. I'm going through the motions.
Just a day after she lost her mother and sister, Tiffany Smith Cofield can't imagine life without them.
There would never be a time where I'm not going to miss my sister or my mother. They were my best friends. They were everything.
35-year-old Brittany Murphy and 60-year-old Cherie Smith were killed in this violent crash on West Tidwell Monday afternoon. They had just left Tiffany's home. Tiffany was heading home and happened upon it.
It looked like her car. Everybody, when I was walking up, they kept saying it. They said a mom and daughter died. A mom and daughter died. And I knew they had left. And I knew the only mom and daughter that was there was going to be my mom. Probably my sisters.
According to police, the truck hit the mother and daughter's car. The investigation is still underway. No one has been charged or cited. Tiffany says a police officer and chaplain prayed with her at the scene.
Those officers really cared.
Brittany was a TikTok influencer. In just 4 short months, she went from 4,000 followers to more than 400,000. Tiffany says she was funny and relatable.
I was proud of her. I'm still proud of her. I'm so proud of her. She will always be known as that girl, Brittany Joy.
Tiffany is now raising funds for the unexpected funeral costs. The two women were her best friends, and Tiffany says their lives were far from tragic.
That's what I want people to remember about them. Not the way they died, but the way they lived and the life they lived and who they inspired.
Yeah. So I was really surprised to hear this news. Like I said, Brittany was my very first guest. Like when I started this podcast, I'll take you back to that moment. We actually did a show called California Exodus. This was over 2 years ago. Brittany, for those who are not aware, Brittany actually was one of the California exit people. So she grew up in California. She left because it was becoming way too expensive, moved to Arizona, stayed there for like a year or so in the Phoenix area. And then she officially settled down in Texas. When I interviewed her in this interview, she was living in Dallas. And then she moved to Houston to be closer to her sister. So the girl that you just saw in the video that was talking, that was her sister. And then her mother relocated to Texas as well. I'll show you a little bit of this. This feels like it's so long ago.
Let's see. Well, I had started YouTube probably about over 2 years ago, but I didn't start taking it serious until about a year ago. But the main reason for me wanting to do YouTube was because I actually like recording myself. Like, I like doing videos. I've always liked doing that since I was like in high school. So I said, oh, you know what? If I can get paid to do this, why not? You know, so at first I was really treating it as a hobby, and then it became something just second nature. So now I just do YouTube. Like, I'm a YouTuber now, and I still can't believe I'm a YouTuber. But I love doing YouTube. Like, I could do this full time, definitely.
So hold on to that piece, because it's almost like that was foreshadowing, right? I could do this full time. There's another piece from this interview that I thought was important when she talked about leaving California. By the way, my audio was horrible. I'm very sorry. I did not have an external mic. That was just like my laptop, my camera for my laptop. Like, I didn't have anything like back then at that point. So you could tell it was very first interview.
Today, Brittany and I are going to talk about the mass exodus that is going on in California. So Brittany used to live in Southern California, and I know like you also lived in Arizona, and now you live in Texas.
Yes. So yeah, I am from Los Angeles, California, really Southern California, but I say LA because people don't know where like Rancho Cucamonga is at. It's a suburb about 45 minutes outside of LA. But my whole family's from LA, so we just say LA. But yeah, there is what did you say it was, a California exodus going on? Like, I've met so many people out here that have moved from California, and it's mainly because of the prices just spiking up and just getting higher and higher. Even in the areas like the suburbs, like far out from LA, like an hour away from LA, the prices are still sky high. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I just was there for Christmas to visit family, and I noticed that there's like the homeless problem has really gotten worse. Like, it's really gotten almost as bad as San Francisco. Like,
so this is just to show you, pieces of that interview. Again, that was over 2 years ago. When was this take place? I didn't even do live streams back then. I did uploads. This video was published. Do you not give me a date on the computer anymore? The computer is like, YouTube is weird. I don't know why I can't see the date on the computer. Anyway, over 2 years ago, right? Oh, here we go. January 9th, 2021. So yeah, that was the very first interview. And I just want you to hold on to that, because remember, she said that she could do this full time. So she didn't grow as fast on YouTube. Like a lot of us had this struggle. She grew very quickly on TikTok. Like, she'd only been on there for 4 months. Her YouTube channel has 5.24K subscribers. It's called That Girl Brittany Joy. And this is when she announced that she went viral. So this is very recent. This was only like 4 months ago when she went viral on TikTok. It happened very fast for her.
Y'all, like, I can't believe, let me see where we at now. It's probably like 60 point something. Hold on. Whoa. Every time I get on here, it's like overwhelming love. Like, this is crazy. I have one video that's at 2 million views, another one at 1.9 million views, 90,000 views, 100,000 views. This one's at 800,000 views, 300,000 views, 300,000 views. Like, oh my gosh, like my TikTok, if y'all are not on there already so y'all can see, my TikTok name is That Girl Brittany Joy. And we are at 61.5 thousand views. Followers. We are at 61.5 thousand followers, bitch!
That was when she first went viral, and she just continued growing from there. And it got to the point where she was able to quit her job. So this video was just 2 months ago when she announced that she quit and she was going to do this all full time. And she got sponsorships and everything.
Going viral and stuff on TikTok. I've been getting a lot of companies hitting me up and stuff like that. And it's been hard to like juggle my job and do the sponsorships and have these videos out at the same time. And I'm like, why am I like, I should be working on my dream. Like I should step out on faith like God wants me to. Cause I've been wanting to do this for a minute anyway. Okay, I've been wanting to lead for a minute. But yesterday was literally, okay, I went on my lunch break and I just didn't come back from my lunch break. I just didn't come back. Now
and she goes into more detail there. So I just like, that was just like 2 months ago. And like it's kind of hard like going back and watch like some of those older videos, just because there's so many people. When you do this, there's so many people you get to meet, right? You get to meet a lot of interesting people, right? So like I got to meet like Brittany, like I got to meet like a lot of guests, a lot of people that you've seen on the show. And people come and go. And what I mean by that is I've seen a lot of people, like they have started channels and then they're here for a minute. A lot of the people that were around like when I first started, like they've stopped like making video. Like I don't see them anymore. I don't hear from them anymore. And she just kept at it and she kept going. And then the moment she got on TikTok, like she just blew up like immediately. She makes very funny videos on TikTok. So that ended up being like her platform that was really doing the thing for her. Her videos have like over millions of views like on TikTok. And what's really sad about this is the fact that I go back to that first conversation that I had with her where she said, I feel like I could do this full time. And she finally got to that point where she could do it full time. And it's like her life was just cut short. And I don't really know what to say, but it's really sad. Like it really hurt me like last night when I saw that, because I didn't think that was real. I was like, this story can't be real, but it really hurts. And so like those of us like in like the creator community and stuff like that, like you're there with each other in the beginning and you're there with people like in the end. And a lot of people like give up, and she never gave up and she just kept doing it. And it's just so sad. Like it really hurts. It made me feel some kind of way. It really does. So I did want to do like some type of tribute to her. So shout out to Brittany. If you go to her TikTok channel, That Girl Brittany Joy, like if you go to TikTok right now and you type in That Girl Brittany Joy, all you see are just videos of people saying rest in power. So, you know, do that if you can as well. But I'll tell you guys, like, you know, if you have a dream or something that you feel that you should be doing, like tomorrow is not promised to any of us. None of us. But yeah, that made me feel some kind of way. I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to do call in. Eric, you want to come in and do the comments, and then I'll be back and we'll go into call in.
All right. Definitely sad news there. Like you never know what can happen to any of us. You know, one day you're driving and a truck goes into your lane and it's game over. But yeah. But thanks for all your comments in the comments. And let's see. All right. Then back into the news as the show goes on. We are going to have call-in tonight. I'm going to put that link in the chat. So this is the part of the show where I jump in to give our Sabby a little break and the call-in show will be starting soon. You can do call-in as an app on your phone, or you can hit the link and bring it up on your browser. You can listen in the browser, or you can come in and join us there or on your phone. And we want to hear what you got to say. Let's take a look. Let's bring up our what our call-in's going to be tonight, Arlo. You can talk about anything you want, but we're going to talk about RFK Jr.'s town hall, reparations, and more. Yeah, I thought the interview tonight was really good with William Darity and Kirsten Mullen. I thought they were very impressive, very just an excellent interview and discussion, and always centering on this idea of reparations as a debt owed. And people would get caught up in what if it's going to some people and not for other people. I mean, we should still have universal programs, but a debt owed is a debt owed. I mean, you have a class of people who had their wealth stolen from them. I mean, their body stolen initially, and just this generational wealth stolen. So I mean, what we should be advocating for is both. Not get caught up in this idea of one group versus the other group, but have the universal programs, but also have the reparations as the debt owed, as it should, on top of that. And we can. One of the things that I think we need to be saying more is, as leftists, is we should be imagining and talking about what our better vision of a world, what a better world looks like. And one of the ways it looks like is universal housing, education, food, the basic needs for everyone, and those kind of programs, but also paying the debt owed, like reparations, and in other cases, and of course with Native Americans, you got land back, and there should be forms of reparations there as well. And so we can have this better world, but we're not going to have it and still have billionaires and still have mega monopolistic corporations. I mean, you either have to have one or the other. And one person in the chat also, noted that giving reparations would be a big economic boost, and that would be a really good thing in that, as well. And so there are all kinds of things, like we could do that. And we can do these things, but it's about political will. It's about having a government that's not completely corrupt and paid off. And, we need to start demanding, these things. I can also touch on the RFK things, man. I mean, we can talk about this in call-in, but I mean, is this me, or is it like the more RFK talks, like the junior, the worse he gets? Because I mean, oh man, it's like, we gotta have a border wall like the Israelis have. It's like, are you kidding me, dude? I mean, I don't know. He's just, and this idea of him as a spoiler is just, it's not even a thing, but they'll say that about him or Cornel West. But it's really, this is duopoly politics, propaganda, this whole idea that a candidate can even be a spoiler. I mean, don't we get to, vote for the people we want? And yeah, it's like, oh, and then some people have been criticizing or wondering about some of Cornel West's positions on these things, and I think even if Cornel West has been imperfect in the past, I mean, the huge difference you see that he's doing that no one else is doing is that he's already coming on these shows. I mean, he was just on RBN, and he's been on Sabby's show, and I just get the feeling from Cornel West that he would truly listen to what people like RBN and Sabrina and us and Real Leftists have to say. And I mean, that's a huge thing. And before I forget, I got to read off this chat. I almost forgot my duty here. All right, we had one more from Hempcar. Thanks for the paid comment on Rockman. I wonder if Mumia or Pelletier have made statements on these shots, on the jabs. You can get us in trouble here, Cap. I learned in high school back in the early 2000s about this unzipping your DNA. Shots bypass the nucleus, but still. Hope John Hopkins says Sears will kill, or John Hopkins says Sears will kill millions and leave 1 billion in wheelchairs. They were right about the the most egregious propaganda is never entirely false. Chomsky said in Hegemony or Survival. And stop WHO WEF. All right, thanks for that comment, Hempcar. All right, now we'll see you in the call-ins.
All right, we are moving on over to call-in. Tonight, this is episode 114, RFK Jr. Town Hall, Reparations and More. What's your opinion on the RFK Jr. Town Hall and Dr. Darity and Mullen's discussion on reparations? We'll talk about that. We can talk about other stories as well. So let's go ahead and head on over there. The link is pinned to the top of the chat. But my message for you guys tonight, like, honestly, like, if you have a dream or something you've been waiting to do, like, go for it, man. Like, again, we never know, how much time we really have. So I will see you guys over on Call-In. You know how we do this. Come back tomorrow night. Pasta will be here. We're going to have a RFK Jr. versus Dr. West discussion. It should be pretty interesting. You know how we do this, guys. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.